So for our next lesson, we are still going to be using the same basic 8 identities, but now we are given an equation, and we are trying to simplify the left side so that it's equal to the right. So right now we're starting off with this equation, tangent x divided by sine x, and we're going to try to plug things in and simplify to make this equal to secant x. Okay, so if we start off with tangent x over sine x, looking at our basic trig identities, we know that tangent is sine over cosine. So I'm going to replace tangent with sine over cosine. And then this is all over sine of x. Okay, so sine of x right now isn't a fraction, but I can make it a fraction by putting it over 1. And my whole right side stays the same, so I'm only changing what's on my left side. Over here, right now I have a fraction divided by another fraction. I know that if I'm dividing by a fraction, it's the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal. So I'm actually going to flip the bottom fraction. So now this is sine x over cosine x times 1 over sine. Right. So here, now that they're being multiplied, I can see that the sine and the sine cancel each other out. So I'm left with 1 over cosine of x. And finally, 1 over cosine, again, if you look at your basic trig identities, 1 over cosine is the same thing as secant. So my very last step, secant is now equal to the right side, and I am done. So check, I've made the left side exactly equal to the right side. So with these problems, you're actually already starting off with the answer. You know what your answer is going to be. You just have to do different things and substitute in to get to that answer. Okay, let's look at number 2. So number 2, we have tangent x plus cotangent x equals 1 over sine x cosine x. So again, right now I'm trying to change my left side so that it's equal to the right side. So no squares. I'm not going to be using any of the Pythagorean identities. I know that tangent is sine x over cosine x, so I'm going to replace it like this. Cotangent is either 1 over tangent or cosine over sine. Because this is in sine and cosine, I'm also going to write cotangent using sine and cosine. So I'm going to rewrite this as cosine over sine. And of course I'm not going to change my right side at all. This is going to stay like this the entire time. So clearly what I want to do here is rewrite this as this. In order to do that, I need to make this into one fraction, because this is one fraction, and this right now these are two separate fractions. In order for me to combine this into one fraction, to add together fractions, they have to have the same denominator. So what I'm doing here is finding the least common denominator. So this one has a sine, this one has a cosine. So your least common denominator has to have both of them, a cosine x and a sine x. So what's missing from this one is your sine x. So I'm going to multiply both top and bottom by sine x. What's missing from this one is your cosine x. So I'm going to multiply both the top and bottom by cosine x. And so when I multiply sine x times sine x, this gives me sine squared. Over here, cosine x times cosine x gives you cosine squared. And now your denominators are the same, so we're able to combine this into one fraction, which is sine x cosine x. And of course my right side stays the same. So my last step here, I'm trying to simplify this. Sine squared plus cosine squared we should recognize from one of the Pythagorean identities. One of the Pythagorean identities is sine squared x plus cosine squared equals 1. So because of that, I can replace this entire numerator with just 1. And then I have sine x cosine x. And over here, the right side of your equation, now they are equal. Check, we are done. Okay, let's move on to number 3. So from number 3, we have 1 plus tangent squared times cosine squared. So you should already notice that the 1 plus tangent squared, we're probably going to use a Pythagorean identity. The one that we have that has tangent squared is 1 plus tangent squared equals secant squared. So 1 plus tangent squared is already written here. So I can replace 1 plus tangent squared with the other side of my equation, which is secant squared. Secant squared x. I still have a cosine squared x. right side is the same. Secant squared, I know secant is a reciprocal. So looking at my trig identities, secant is the same thing as 1 over cosine. So I can turn this into 1 over, because it's secant squared, I also want this to be cosine squared, times cosine squared. And right now, because it's just a number, it's not a fraction, I turn it into a fraction by putting it over 1. And the cosine squareds cancel out. 1 over 1 is just 1. And so 1 equals 1, and again, we are done.